So I'm outside a thrift store because I'm gonna go try to find some more furniture. I'm actually, this is crazy, but I'm out of furniture to work on. I have one dresser in my garage, but I'm not feeling it. I don't like the design. I just can't come up with the design. So I'm pushing it to the side. I'm gonna go find some good pieces to work on, hopefully. So I'm gonna take you along with me. So as soon as I walk back to the furniture section, I see this beautiful dresser. For some reason, I just love this style. Yes, it has some really rough areas, but before and afters are my all-time favorite because I truly feel like I'm rescuing a piece of furniture. It definitely takes some more patience, especially with this missing veneer, but it's totally worth it for me, especially if it's only $17.99. The drawers were actually fine operationally, even though these seem stuck. It just looks like a lot of cosmetic work and not structural, which is a win for me because cosmetic fixes are a lot faster than structural fixes. I also saw this beautiful French provincial dresser, tons of drawers. It's not my favorite style though, but it was in great shape for someone who actually needs a piece of furniture without any work, and it was a steal, so I left it for someone else to buy. Last thing I saw were these gorgeous mid-century chairs for only $4. I almost bought them but realized they would have a hole in the fabric because they stuck the tag through it. I considered getting them anyways, but there was no way to fix the hole with at least my skill level, that is, so I left these two. But I did stand there for a full 10 minutes considering buying them. So that was a huge success. I cannot believe that I found something. I was expecting not to find anything for like at least 3 thrift store shops, but the first one and the first dresser I saw, fell in love, and the guy gave it to me for $3 cheaper. Let's see. It was $17.99 and he just said, I'm trying to get rid of furniture. How about let's make it $14.99? And I was like, okay, I'll take the extra $3 off for sure. So now I'm gonna drive around and they're gonna load it up for me. This is just glorious. Maybe I should start shopping at thrift stores more often. I usually avoid them because they're high priced, but maybe they just have an influx of furniture. I don't know, but I'm liking it. Thank you so much, guys. Yep. I am so glad that I found this dresser. I love this design. It's actually one of my top go-to designs. If I see one on sale, it's like I have to have it just because I love the look of it so much. I don't know what to call it though. Oh my God, there's a spider. Hold on. Ah! That's the worst thing about furniture flipping. Ew, now I don't even know if I want to touch this yet without vacuuming it and cleaning. But before I get started on cleaning, I know this is in rough shape and a lot of people passed on this dresser, hence why he knocked the price down for me. It's been sitting there for a while, but this is going to be such a beautiful before and after, and it's such a solid piece of furniture that it deserves a new life, and I'm going to completely restore it. So it's going to be solid wood. Yes, there's veneer missing, but I'm going to show you how to fix those gaps in veneer so that you can still stain it and make it look brand new again. So let's get cleaning so there's no more spiders coming out at me. So before I can continue to work on this dresser, I need to test for lead. I plan to sand the finish off because there's like not even a finish left on this. Like it's gonna be so easy to sand off rather than use a chemical stripper. However, if it does test positive for lead, I do have to use a chemical stripper. So that's why it's so important to test for lead before you work on it. And to use the lead test, all you do is just dip this little swab in some vinegar, wipe it on, and then it'll tell you if it has lead in it or not. However, I'm out of vinegar, so I need to run to the store. All right, I just got the vinegar. Now to test it, when you test it, the swab goes from a white purplish color to orange. You know how that's like activated it? And then you need to rub it on there for, I think it's 20 seconds. So it doesn't say, but I do it for about 20 seconds to really make sure it's completely coated in the finish. And if it doesn't change color, you know that you don't have any lead. It stays that orangish color. When you have lead, it starts getting into purple pink colors. But I don't just ever test the top, I test the drawer fronts too, because who knows? I'd just rather be safe than sorry. We're good? No lead. So we can move on to sanding. I saw these drawers in the thrift store. I just forgot how bad they were. They're really gross. Structurally, they're okay, but they're just really nasty. But that's easy to clean. We just sand those away. So I forgot to remove the hardware first, so I put the drawer back in. It's easier to remove hardware for some reason for me if the drawers are in. And then I just keep them in a little container because I have lost so many pieces of hardware if I don't put them all together in one little container. So this backing is really gross. I'm just going to remove it now and I'll replace it later. It'll make it easier to work on too. So because the top is plywood, and actually I'm just going to do the whole thing in 220 grit sandpaper just to treat it very carefully. Again, I don't think this finish is going to take a whole lot for it to get off. It's not shiny. You can just tell it's already flaking off. So I think this will be my best bet just to protect the veneer that's over it on all areas. So I hook my sander up to my shop vac to reduce the sand that gets in the air. I'm also going to be wearing my mask. I can't talk with it on. I'm only using 220 grit sandpaper like I said before, so the finish comes off a little slower. That's just what it is. It's a finer grit, so the finish doesn't come off as quicker, but that's on purpose because it's veneer and I really didn't want to sand through and damage any more veneer than has already been damaged. While I was doing that though, I realized that my words came back to haunt me and this finish was actually really tricky to get off, at least with 220 grit sandpaper. I should have switched gears at this point, but I'm too stubborn, so I just continued sanding. Even though the finish was actually still pretty blotchy, where I missed a lot of the original finish, I stopped here at this point because I didn't want to sand through that veneer. So first I'm going to hand sand to get rid of these blotchy spots, make it nice and even.
How's your day? What is that?
That kid's username in Roblox.
Oh, so you can be friends? Oh, cool. So my kids are home from school, so I'm gonna stop there today and wrap it up. And tomorrow I am going to finish sanding, and I think I'm gonna strip the sides and the front. Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow, but we'll find out.
So I'm going to start today off by finishing up sanding the rest of the drawers that I didn't finish yesterday. I'm also going to sand the sides of the drawers, the insides, get them all nice and fresh. I also slept on it and still feel stripping the sides and the front of the dresser will be the fastest way to go just because of how long the sanding process took me. I'm going to just switch gears and try something else to see if it's faster because I don't want to go through what I went through yesterday again. So I'm going to be using a stripper of sorts. It's acetone. It actually works really, really well on most finishes. I wouldn't ever use it on really thick, shiny, glossy finishes, but on finishes like this where it's like kind of already coming off, this should work pretty well. Definitely wear industrial size gloves, double them up, and protection of the lungs. And the way that I'm going to use it is I'm just going to pour it on, let it sit, and then scrub with a wire brush. And I will probably get a little wire pad too to help scrub it off. So I love using this steel wool to scrub off acetone because it's super fine, so it doesn't ruin the grain of your wood, but it is abrasive enough to help remove the finish faster. So you can kind of see in this video that the top layer of the finish is getting removed, but not necessarily the stain color. So I'm still going to have to sand, but I think it's going to make it a lot faster than what I was doing with just sanding. The other reason I really like using acetone is because it dries really quickly and you can just use some odorless mineral spirits to wipe it off if you need to. Sometimes I don't even. This is the end result after a first pass of using acetone, which I'm going to go to sanding now because I think that it was more of a thick finish than I thought it was on that top surface there. And you can already tell with 220 grit sandpaper, this is coming off so much faster than just sanding it. I wish I would have done this on everything else. So for the areas that need to be filled, I'm going to use an epoxy wood putty. And the way that you use it is just mix the two together and that's it. It just activates the ingredients inside to start the hardening process. Like this stuff, it's good stuff. I actually prefer called Quickwood, but I'm all out, so I am going to use this stuff. And then I will be able to blend in the stain when I go to stain it, and I'll share with you how I do that.
If you've ever wondered what veneer is, this is veneer. It's just a thin sheet of wood with some adhesive on the back that covers up an unpleasant looking piece of wood. And that's what I'm gonna do here to cover up this plywood side. And the way that I apply this is just my little baby iron. I love this thing for veneer. And you just heat up the glue that's on the backing of the veneer. And that's it. It's so simple. At least these small sheets of veneer, super simple to apply. It does get a little more complicated as you get into larger sheets, but still very doable. And in fact, I have a whole video on when I did that, and I'll link it below. And I just apply even pressure throughout until I know that that glue is really heated up. You can tell by like, it's not moving anymore. It's pretty well stuck. I kind of go on the curves with the edges here to make sure that it's all going to stick. This is what I use to line my drawers with, and it's just like helps get the air bubbles out of wallpaper, and it can do the same thing with your veneer. You just push down even pressure pretty hard just because you really want to make sure that it will stick. And this is definitely a different wood type than these side pieces and even the legs, but we're going to blend everything in to make it look like one seamless color, hopefully.
I trimmed off the excess veneer with scissors and then sanded down the edges. You could also use an edge trimmer with a built-in blade to cut off that extra veneer, then follow up with sanding. I did both here. I usually go with 220 grit sandpaper for this part. At this point in the refinishing process, I honestly thought I'd be much further along than I am, but for some reason, this always seems to happen to me. Then my husband had shared with me a stat a couple days ago that really stuck with me. He heard it on a podcast. They said that if you think a task will take you 1 hour, you should multiply that by 4 to get the actual amount of time it'll take. And honestly, that could not be more true in my experience. I've been refinishing furniture for about 5 years now, and you'd think I'd have a better handle on time estimates, but I don't. So from now on, I'm going to try applying that rule and see if it helps me manage my expectations and my schedule a little better. Let me know if anyone else struggles with this too. The wood putty was dry at this point, so I sanded it smooth on all the areas I applied it to. The main reason I don't recommend this wood putty epoxy and why I don't have it linked below is because of how long it takes to dry as opposed to the one I do recommend. The one that I'm using now takes about 24 hours to dry, while Quickwood is only about an hour.
So it's time to finally stain, which is always the scariest part for me in a project, because if it stains poorly, it's like you have to start all over again, and that to me is the worst. So fingers crossed this goes right. So the first thing that I'll do is use a pre-stained wood conditioner, and that's almost like a sealer on top, so the stain doesn't penetrate down into the grain. It makes for more of an even stain. When you're using a gel stain, which I plan to, you don't even need to use this, but I'm just going to take every precaution, start with a pre-stain, then move on to a gel. So let's go ahead and try it, and cross your fingers for me. Actually, first I'm going to wipe everything down to get the dust off with this tack cloth.
I apply the pre-stain pretty generously and let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes before wiping off the excess. If I were working with a softer wood like pine, I'd let it sit for at least 15 minutes to really give it time to soak in. But with this wood and the stain that I'm using, it's not as crucial, so a shorter wait time works just fine. As soon as I wipe off all the pre-stain, I don't let it sit for very long before I move on to staining. You can let it sit for long, but I think you can't let it sit for longer than 24 hours. Otherwise, it becomes almost like a sealer and you have to sand it down and re-stain again. I apply the gel stain pretty generously too. Then I let it sit for about 5 minutes before wiping it back. With gel stain, you want to make sure you wipe off all the excess. Otherwise, it can leave streaks. You might go through a few extra lint-free cloths with the gel stain, but the finish turns out really evenly if you get it all off. And if your gel stain feels a bit too thick, you can thin it out with some mineral spirits to make it easier to work with. For the areas that I used wood putty on, the gel stain didn't quite stain like the other wood, so I'm going to paint a base color using a brown paint. Then I'm just going to add some black lines to really mimic that wood grain. It's not 100% perfect, but it's way better than what it was with just missing veneer. And that black pen is from Minwax, and it is a color corrector essentially. So the stain didn't quite stain evenly like I expected it to with the gel stain. It actually looks better on camera than it does in person. So I'm actually going to mix up a toner of sorts and spray it on to see if that helps. I've never done this before, so it might not work, but in my head, this seems like it will do everything I want, which is just making everything one even color. I had this Behr Dark Walnut water-based stain on hand, so I'm going to mix it with this water-based poly just so it's a one-step process of both evening the stain and protecting it. If you are mixing stains and polys together, the only thing you have to kind of watch out for is if they're the same base. So make sure you're mixing water with water or oil with oil. I use my paint sprayer to apply it because it's fast and I thought that would give me a more even tone all over. I wasn't expecting to stain it this dark, but I'm actually kind of liking it this dark now. Luckily, all the hardware was with the dresser, so I just needed to clean it. If hardware is really dirty like these were, I heat up water and vinegar and let the hardware soak for about 10 to 15 minutes, then pull them out and scrub them. I could tell the original color wasn't what I wanted because it just wouldn't stand out on this new dresser color that I stained it in. So I used some antique gold rub and buff. This stuff is so great to add that perfect gold color back into hardware or kind of anything really. I love adding drawer liners to dressers. It's such a simple detail, but it really makes a difference. I honestly think that the little extra touch helps them sell a bit more. So many buyers have said things like, oh my gosh, I love the drawer liners. That's what caught my eye in the photos. So it's definitely something people notice. I also like using liners to protect my drawer bottoms at home on everything that I own. I just use peel and stick wallpaper. It's super easy to apply, easy to remove, and it comes in a lot of fun patterns. After I finished lining the drawers, I used some Howard's Feed and Wax to refresh the drawers. They definitely needed it after sanding, and it just makes a huge difference. Plus, it smells amazing. And it's finally done. Seriously, how stunning is this piece now? Before we wrap up, let's take a quick walk down memory lane and look at what it looked like before when I got it at the thrift store for only $14. It had missing veneer, stains all over the top and sides, even inside the drawers, and the hardware was really faded and honestly pretty gross. But now look at it, the transformation is so unreal. The stain ended up turning out darker than I originally planned, but I actually kind of love how it came together, especially paired with this gold hardware. I think it suits the style of this piece perfectly, and it's going to look absolutely beautiful in someone else's home. I'll be listing this piece for $475, and if you're not quite sure how to price your own furniture flips, I've got you covered. Check out my pricing guide linked below. It's packed with tips to help you price your pieces confidently. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss my next flip.